Okay, you are live. I'm going to mute, and if you need me, just give me a shout, okay?
Thank you, Alex. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Norwich City Council Licensing Subcommittee on Monday, 2nd of November 2020. We're here today to hear about Junkyard Market, St Mary's Works in Norwich, and that is a application for a full licence. So I'll start the meeting today with apologies, please. There are no apologies, and also declarations of interest. Again, none. So we'll move on to the application of grant of a premises licence, Junkyard Market. We have here our applicant and a number of objectors, and I think it would be useful to run through everybody and talk to you first. And ask you to tell us who you are first, and I'll introduce the committee as well. My name's Ian Stuteley, I'm the chair today. We have Councillor Nanette Youssef, who is one of the committee members, and the other committee member is Jacob Huntley, Councillor Jacob Huntley. We've got Rachel, who is the licensing officer, and Alex in the background, who is looking after us today, and we also have David Lowens, who is our solicitor from NP Law. Okay, so I'll start on my screen from the left, and if everybody could just introduce yourselves by name and tell us whether you're an objector or in support of the application, please, and your role if there is one. So I'll start with Rob Mack, please.
Yeah, my name's Rob. Thank you, Chair. I'm the DPS for the project, so I'm for the project.
DPS, thank you. Okay, and I have Toby Westgarth next.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Toby Westgarth. I am representing Norwich Market Traders Association. I'm the acting chair, and I'm also representing myself as a licence holder in Norwich. I'm against the application.
Okay, thank you very much. And next, Alex Russell Davis, please.
Yes, so my name's Alex Russell Davis. I'm a resident in the area, and I'm an interested party who's objecting to the application. And for the benefit of other people, your objection is on page 71 of the pack that we've got today. Okay, thank you. And Martin Schmierer, please.
Hello, yes, my name is Councillor Martin Schmierer. I'm one of the local councillors for the area in which the junkyard market will find itself, namely Mancroft ward, and I put in a representation highlighting some concerns that residents have raised with me as a local councillor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Schmierer. We lost you there for a moment, so hopefully we'll be okay.
Do you want me to do that again?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, my name's Councillor Martin Schmierer. I'm one of the councillors for the area in which the junkyard restaurant finds itself, namely Mancroft ward, and I've put in a representation based on what local residents have contacted me about, outlining many of their concerns.
Okay, thank you. We got that time. Okay, so we have Michael Femiola, please, if you could unmute.
Yeah, my name is Michael Femiola. I'm Director of After Dark Promotions and organisers of the Junkyard Market.
Okay, thank you. And then Gavin Tempest.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, Gavin Tempest. I'm a licensing consultant from Norwich Licensing Associates, and I'm representing the applicant today.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it. Oh, hang on, we have Sandra Olive, who is.
Yep, Sandra. I'm a local resident and objecting to the application.
Okay, thank you. And Rachel, can you tell us, please, what page Sandra's objection is on, please? I haven't found it yet. Yes, I have. Page 8 is the reference, everybody, please. Okay, now I'll hand over to Rachel, who will read the report for this application. Rachel, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members are asked, in accordance with the delegation of licensing functions contained in the Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy, Licensing Act 2003, to consider the application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of Junkyard Market, St Mary's Works Car Park, St Mary's Plain, Norwich, following the receipt of relevant representations. Recommendation is that members determine the application to grant the premises licence in accordance with the Licensing Act of 2003, guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, and Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy. So the report. The applicant is After Dark Promotions Limited. The proposed DPS is Robert McCallum, and the application seeks to allow the licensable activities, times and opening hours as set out in the application form, which is attached Appendix A. This also includes the steps to promote licensing objectives in the operating schedule. Relevant representations. The responses from responsible authorities are as follows. Police, there was a representation received, but the applicant agreed to conditions, and this can be seen at Appendix B. No representations were received from Environmental Protection, Fire Officer, Planning Officer, Area Child Protection Committee, Trading Standards, or the Primary Care Trust. However, representations objecting to the application were received from 12 local residents and a councillor. 2 have been received in support, which includes 1 from a councillor. Copies of the representations are attached Appendix C to the report, and attached Appendix D is a site location map. Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy. Attached Appendix E are the elements of the City Council's local licensing policy which are considered to have a bearing upon the application. National guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003. Attached Appendix F are the elements of the national guidance issued by the Secretary of State that are considered to have a bearing upon the application. Summary. In determining the application with a view to promoting the licensing objectives, the subcommittee must give appropriate weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote the licensing objectives, i.e. the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The representations, including supporting information presented by all parties, the guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act of 2003, national guidance, and the Council's own statement of licensing policy. The subcommittee must take such of the following steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Grant the application as asked, modify the conditions of the licence by altering or omitting or adding to them, reject the whole or part of the application, refuse to accept the proposed DPS. The subcommittee is asked to note that it may not modify the conditions or reject the whole or part of the application merely because it considers it desirable to do so. It must actually be appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives. The representations received appear to relate to issues that fall under the licensing objectives. The subcommittee is directed to paragraphs 20-24 of the local licensing policy at Appendix D, which contain examples of factors that might impact on licensing objectives that the applicant could consider when addressing these issues. These paragraphs also contain examples of control measures that may be taken into account in operating schedules having regard to the type of premises and all the licensing activities. The subcommittee is also reminded of the contents of Appendices 2, 3, 4 and 5 of the local licensing policy, which is not reproduced in this report, but contains pools of model conditions relating to the 4 licensing objectives. Thank you, Chair.
Oh no, the sound's gone on them.
Yeah, you're muted.
Muted.
Apologies for that. Okay, thank you, Rachel. I think now we'll move over to Michael Femiola, who I believe is going to speak on behalf of the application.
Chair, I don't know if the applicant's representative wants to, as it were, go first.
Okay, is that Mr. Tempest?
Yes, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, because we're in different places, I'll come in mute when Mike or Rob speak, and then we'll flip about, but try and keep to time if that's okay, Chair. So yeah, I'm representing the applicant, and I'll just ask Michael, as the applicant, to give a brief resume just by way of introduction, please.
Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'd just like to thank everyone for their time today. So my name is Michael Femiola, I'm the Director of After Dark Promotions, and I have marketed events here in Norwich for the last 9 years. I hold a premises license at the Royal Norfolk Showground, and our company is considered one of the largest event organisers in the UK. We have extensive experience in both the pre-planning, build and delivery of events, and have done so with a proven track record within local authorities for the last 9 years. We're really passionate about supporting local. We're passionate about supporting both local communities, but also local businesses as well. We work with a lot of local contractors. And I've lived in Norwich for the last 15 years on Mospole Street, just around the corner from the site. So I went to the University of East Anglia and studied management and marketing. And along with other training, that's really helped to sort of form my career in event organisation. I'm now going to pass over to Rob Mack, who's our operations director, to have he'll carry on.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, my name's Rob. I'm the DPS on this project. I'm a Norwich boy, born and bred. I've worked in the city in the licensed trade for about 20 years. Wealth of experience, really know how the city works when it comes to the licensed trade, and have a really good working relationship with Michelle and Richard at Police Licensing.
Thank you. Yeah, at this stage, we very unkindly to Rachel tried to serve a number of documents last Thursday and Friday, Chair. Many of them were time bound, and I'd just like to ask if it's okay to refer to 2 of them, just 2 of them. The first one is a portfolio presentation of photographs of the site, which we've labelled Exhibit MF02, and the second one is some snapshots from the police crime website, which is Exhibit MF04.
Okay, thank you. Can you explain first of all how the first document is relevant to the application in terms of the licensing objectives?
Yes. So the photo portfolio is intended to give members a realistic, and the full subcommittee a realistic view of the site. There's been some allegations that it represents a drinking establishment, etc. And these are photographs that were taken over the course of this late summer when it was actually operating. So it's intended to be informative, actually, so that everybody who hasn't had the opportunity to go to the site can have a look at what is intended.
Okay. Can I ask members of the committee, do you have those documents in front of you? I'm just going to look up mine and open it up. Jacob and Nanette, do you have these in front of you? Can you just indicate?
Yes, I have these.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you, Chair. So taking it as read that members now have had a look at it, this is what's going to be replicated, or is proposed will be replicated with a premises license with some full conditions attached. And if I just flip back to Michael very quickly, Michael, if you could just go through the business model, how this is intended to work, so that members are aware.
Thanks, Gavin. So basically, we started the junkyard market with a community ethos at heart. We want people to enjoy the high-end street food and drink offerings that we have available, but more importantly, we hope to have a positive impact on the local community. The project aimed to create a unique space in which the local community could enjoy some sense of normality during this time. And due to the short turnaround of the project, it really became a real community project in terms of acting upon the feedback that we got to make the project better week on week. And yeah.
And Mike, you were just going to, just one or two facts and figures about attendance and et cetera, that you were just going to put in at this stage, if you don't mind.
Great. And so over the course of the project, we had 27,000 attendees, slightly over, and we also had no ejections or any antisocial behaviour at the event, and we raised £27,500 for local charities, including the Soup Movement and the St Martin's charity, through a £1 optional donation on orders from attendees at the event.
Thank you. Now, just to confirm, and the weekends when the junkyard market was open using temporary events, they were all implemented during the pandemic and after the 4th of July, when hospitality businesses could reopen subject to the strict coronavirus prevention measures. So this operation, and going forward, it was built and will be built entirely with COVID-19 security at its heart. And health and safety experts were involved with the team for an in-depth risk assessment, which you can see in the application pack, which I think is on pages 48 to 63. And that part of the document is a site-specific risk assessment for the operation in the upper car park at St Mary's Works. And that was kept constantly under review and has been subject to scrutiny by the environmental protection team in the council, who have no issue with this application. Now, public health is not a licensing objective, but we draw attention to that because this work is actually a critical feature, particularly in view of the announcements of the weekend of the proposed operation with a premises license. And the temporary event notices gave the applicant a thorough trial run for the license, as well as making sure of the COVID security. We have a comprehensive understanding of how to promote the licensing objectives. And that was done in collaboration with Norfolk Constabulary, and we welcome the suggested amendment to one proposed condition and the inclusion of two more, which wasn't in the original application. But I can refer to that now, Chair, if you don't have that available, because that represents a change to the application.
Yes, just for the benefits of other members here and those watching, the page 66 is the relevant page of the pack for the submission from the police. Is that what you're referring to?
That's correct, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there were three conditions there, two of which are in addition to those that you'd already put in place, and you're accepting those conditions.
Yes, they're sensible conditions, and they just add to the promotion of the licensing objectives. So of course we would accept those. Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Right.
May I continue?
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yes, there is. If that's okay,
Please do.
I'll go quickly then, Chair. We did try and submit, which was a late exhibit NF03, which is made up of statements from customers and stakeholders, but I'll just refer to those. They do describe a broader range of benefits from the premises license, not just a safe way for people to enjoy what could be a fun dining experience, but the offer of local employment and support for those who don't have the good fortune to be able to pay for food, and that includes some people, Dr. Jan Sheldon, who's the Chief Executive of St Martin's Housing, etc., etc. I refer to the representation from Councillor Ben Price. He was a customer, and I draw your attention specifically, if I could say that, to his representation. And I know that this is pertinent not just by virtue of what he says, but by the fact that he's taken the time to say it, and despite having had justification to make representations to oppose numerous licence applications in the past. Now, would it be okay, Chair, to refer to very briefly the exhibit MF04, which is just some snapshots of the crime mapping system, please, because it is relevant, because that shows the crime figures as reported throughout the use of the temporary event notices.
Yes. Before you do that, I'd just like to make a note on the other items you've highlighted, and that is that the committee is here to determine a licence based on the licensing objectives rather than any other benefits that or otherwise that come from this application. So it's important for members to remember that. So any other benefits are irrelevant. Thank you. Yes, the police information is relevant, so we'd like to hear about that, please.
Thank you. So this is from police.uk website, and also all reported incidents of crime and antisocial behaviour that are reported to the police are displayed on this representation. So and it was made up to date on Friday at midday when the September 2020 figures were published online. So it includes all but one of the weekends, including the one on late summer bank holiday, and apologies that was presented twice, but these figures show there was no increase in reported crime or antisocial behaviour throughout the time that the junkyard market was open. In fact, in the immediate vicinity, which is the relevant part for prevention of crime and disorder, the overall numbers, although their overall numbers are low, there was in fact a slight decrease in the immediate vicinity. I have that open if members want to drill into what those figures, the exact crimes are, but that's probably too much detail. And I'd ask members to note that Norfolk Constabulary did not make any representations in response to reports to the police on any of the 7 weekends of the operation. There weren't any such reports. I can go into detail about how that process works, but perhaps again, I'll move on. So we present this as evidence that there's been no reported crime and disorder as a result of the junkyard market this summer. And finally, we know the written representations from interested parties and that some have taken the time to take part in the hearing today. We do understand that a new enterprise such as this can disturb the routine way of life of some people, and Michael and Rob have collaborated with the responsible authorities to make sure that the premises licence will best promote the licensing objectives, and they're in the conditions attached to the licence that have been spoken about already. And the applicants feel they've reached out to local people by letting them know what to expect, inviting them to see what is going on as guests, and welcoming any feedback whilst the event was trialled using temporary event notices. In fact, several invitations and letters were issued, I think it's 50, were issued to immediate neighbours prior to the opening on the first weekend. So we're quite surprised really by the number of objections that have come in. And while the operating schedule within the application will more than adequately make sure that the business with a premises licence will comply with all 4 licensing objectives, the applicant would continue to invite anyone who feels there's an issue to make themselves known, and every reasonable step will be taken to mitigate their concerns. So the offer stands really for businesses operating, when it operates with a premises licence. It'll only work if they're good neighbours and they want to be that. But I just finish by saying what this has not been, Chair. This has not been a destination for drinkers, and it certainly has not been a party destination for rowdy young people. It's never been anything like popular conceptions of Prince of Wales Road, which is described in the representations, and I'm aware that's my time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Tempest, and others. I think it'd be best now to hear from residents in the area, and it looks like we have 2 of those.
Chair, I don't know whether you want questions to the applicant from the objectors now or later.
I think we'll hear from everybody first, and then we'll have some questions, and people can question each other as well as members. So we'll just hear from, first of all, Mr. Russell Davis, please.
Hello. So basically, I have been living in Muswell Street for the last 3 years, and I'm just basically in relation to the issues raised by Mr. Tempest, that local residents were invited and welcome feedback. That hasn't been my experience, I have to say. I have submitted some correspondence that I put forward to representatives of the junkyard market, complaining about the level of noise as early as August 16th, and requesting that some form of signage was put in to ask that patrons leaving the venue be asked to respect the neighbours and keep a low volume. That wasn't actioned. I was informed that it had been actioned within the second week, and after surveying the site, I found that not to be the case. I also alerted the representatives that I'd been discussing that matter with to the fact that it hadn't been implemented, and was again told that it would then be implemented the next weekend, and I didn't see it actually take place until the very last week of the event in September. That's sort of been my experience of trying to get some feedback actioned with Junkyard Market. I've also had to request that my councillor intervene, my local councillor, Jamie Osborne, intervene to try and make sure that signage was put in place. As I say, it was failed to, that was not actioned at the time. But in general, I'd just like to say that the level of noise of patrons departing the site is the major issue of disruption, along with littering and public urination outside my neighbours' homes. They've reported to me I've experienced littering outside my front door, and a great deal of noise and disruption from patrons leaving the site. In addition, there's also many areas that I feel that under the local licensing policy, Junkyard Market's failing to address in terms of an effective management of entrance queues, as those queues tend to very regularly spill out onto the public highway, onto Duke Street, and often cornering round onto St Mary's Plain. There are no social distance markers in place beyond, well, there are some in the primary car park. There's some minor indication of how those routes are supposed to go, but the fact is there's simply not enough people on site to marshal those queues and crowd control those queues from obstructing the public highway. And I feel that's also an issue that really needs to be addressed with the application. And also I have also witnessed alcohol and food being taken off site, particularly over the bank holiday weekend that was mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just remind people that are not speaking to mute your mics, just to prevent any background noise. Okay, so we'll ask some questions based on those observations shortly. We'll also hear from Sandra Olive now.
Thank you. Yes, I live in the courtyard opposite St Mary's Plain, just off Duke Street. And I've been there 7 years, and whilst we get the odd person wander into the courtyard periodically, the difference both before and after and the time that the junkyard market was operating was noticeable, to the point that I've had milk taken off my doorstep. Now, I can't prove that this is people coming from the junkyard market, but it's never happened before and it's not happened since. I've had to clear up beer cans off the garden furniture out in the courtyard, and in order to get to my garden furniture you have to come up to my front door, negotiate your way around the plants and get to the table. These are not people just wandering into the courtyard with a beer. I've seen people outside in the courtyard, and I appreciate your lovely photographs, and I'm sure it was lovely during the daytime, but the people that I saw coming into the courtyard were young people who had had an awful lot to drink, sometimes with drink in their hands still, and on one occasion happened to be looking out the window as a young woman was about to drop her trousers in the courtyard. She jumped a mile when I knocked on the window. But you know, the noise and the additional stress of having that there made it uncomfortable for me. None of us would have objected at the point when this was going on, A, because we thought it was temporary, and B, because we're all very conscious that we're in the context of an unusual situation. And I work at the hospital. I'm very aware of what COVID is doing to people. But I think accepting that this was going to be a temporary thing, supporting local businesses during COVID and switching it to a 7-day-a-week permanent license is a very different matter. So I would not have objected during that time. I certainly wouldn't have rung the police and said, by the way, there's a young woman just run out of the courtyard having been caught nearly peeing in the courtyard, because why would you do that at this point in time? That doesn't mean that those things didn't happen. It just means that they weren't reported, which is not reflected in the information from the police, of course. And in terms of not being prepared to accept things that disrupt our routine way of life, it's not about routine way of life. I'm very happy to support local business and support charitable events, but not when it creates an insecurity in my own property. And our courtyard is open to the road, and I think it's been used as a pub garden for the duration of the summer, essentially. Those are my concerns.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, there's a number of items there that have been flagged up. And before we hear from other objectors, I'd like Mr. Tempest, will you respond to these? So we've got matters ranging essentially outside of the venue, and what measures you put in place to try and prevent those, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, what I intend to do is just to ask Michael, I think, maybe Michael and Rob to answer those. But of course, I would start by raising, I mean, some of the things that Sandra Oliver said in particular, like stolen milk and people urinating, of course, that is hard to accept, and it's a bad thing. But we have to be sure, really, that those things are happening as a direct result of people that have enjoyed an experience at the junkyard market. Mike, there was a number of things there, ranging from noise, littering, management of the queues. Could you just address those from your experience, so we can say not only what you did, but what the intention is with this premises license application, please?
Thanks, Gavin. So a couple of things there. The first thing being that correspondence was made from Alex to Sam, who operates the Shoe Factory Social Club and represents our place. He contacted her directly and not the junkyard market. Perhaps if he had contacted us via some social media channels, sometimes if you are not followed by the junkyard market, it wouldn't. We wouldn't actually see that. First thing I'd like to say is the sign for residents went up on the 28th of August. We contracted CIM signs, and we made over 150 signs that went up across the site, which included floor signs to help manage the queuing system, but also around the sites. And with regards to food and drink being taken off the sites, we do give customers and attendees 2 warnings, one warning 15 minutes before, and then a second warning at the end of the event, the end of that sitting. And that's done through our PA speaker and made by Rob, who is our operations manager. In addition to that, we have further barriers to make sure that food and drink is not taken off the site, and that can be in the way of 2 marshals on the door to make sure that anyone that is perhaps not heard or not listened or not to the announcements are then further told to put their drink or food into the 2 bins that are next to the entries and exit to the site. And then in addition to this, Sandra mentioned that cans of beer were found in her garden courtyard, and mentioned that her courtyard was used as a pub garden. We don't actually sell cans of beer, so if there were cans of beer, which she has mentioned in her courtyard, they could have been from other places, but it is impossible for them to have been from the junkyard market, because we don't sell cans of beer. Beer is sold but on draft, so that can't be the case. When it comes to the management of the queuing system, we worked with Harrier, who are a health and safety contractor, and they'd done a site visit before we opened, and they actually put the signage up around the site, worked with Rob and I, and advised us best place on how to put the signage around, in addition to the signage that was on the floor for the queuing system. We also, towards the end of the project, we had COVID marshals to further make sure that people that were queuing socially distanced and adhering to the signage that was on the floor. So that was a development as the project went on. But in terms of some of the comments made, we definitely want to support the local community. I mean, I live on Muspole Street myself, so I completely understand that obviously with being in the city centre, there can be noise on Muspole Street from other establishments. We want to work with local residents. We don't want to alienate local residents, as Gab has mentioned. Working with residents here is key to be able to have a successful event.
Okay, thank you, Michael. You've mentioned a few measures you put in place to mitigate some of these issues. But how, therefore, do you think food and alcohol is being taken off the site, aside from the cans of beer, which obviously customers could have taken with them? And also referencing the queues. Clearly there's an issue with the queues and the social distancing with the queues. Are you saying that there isn't a problem with queues?
What I'm saying with regards to, first of all, how we are taking measures in place to prevent people from bringing food and drink off site. So initially we started the project by making announcements on the PA system, and as the operation carried on, we upped the level by including marshals after the first weekend. After our first weekend debrief, we had marshals on the exit with the bins. A step that we could take is searching bags as customers leave the event. That's the only way in which I can see a customer being able to take any food or drink off the site, because the Mark II marshals there, people egress throughout the course of the slot and the time, so it's not like everyone leaves all at once. Therefore, having two people is enough to be able to easily manage to check that people aren't taking drinks off the site. But the only way that I could see if any food or drink was taken off site would be in bags. But to further sort of just express that we don't serve cans. So for drinks to be taken off that are served in the reusable plastic Tupperware, if that was put into a bag, it's very easy for it to spill over and obviously ruin the contents or potentially damage the contents of a bag. So with that being said, having customers putting things into their bag and then leaving would be very risky, and some would suggest that is unlikely. So I'm not sure if Alex has seen this throughout the whole course of the project, or if he's suggesting that it was at the start and not at the end. So that's a question for Alex. But with regards to the food and drink being taken off, that I see as very unlikely towards.
So basically, just in summary, you're saying that as things stand with the marshals in place, it would be almost impossible for somebody to carry a drink off site.
That's correct.
Okay. And could you just respond to the queues, please?
Yeah, and then in answer to your queue question, so we have worked with Harrier we have two weekly briefings, one on a Monday after the event, and then we have another one on the Friday to be able to adapt to any changes in government guidelines or adapt to any changes in how the event's going to operate from feedback that we give to our health and safety team. So we are in very constant communication with our health and safety team. And we have, after the first weekend, we decided that the queuing system, obviously the event was very popular, and we had the stickers in place on the floor, and we had different procedures in place to help to make sure that customers were doing that by making sure that stickers were large, making sure that the stickers were constantly checked to make sure they hadn't come out of place, and were very bright and colourful. But then we mentioned to Harrier that obviously we are leaving it in the hands of customers to make sure that they're socially distanced, and we need to take, we maybe need to change that. So that's when we then implemented the COVID marshals with signage on big high-vis jackets. We had high-vis vests as well. And they would go and make sure that people were socially distanced in the queue. When we've done the whole event debrief with Harrier, and we have worked on ways, so it won't be a Disney queue as they like to call it, but it will be a queuing system that is put in place to allow for more people to queue within the site, but still socially distanced. So we're working on that so that we will be able to have more people contained within the site to make sure that there's no spillage onto the street, and we're also implementing taxi collection as well.
Okay, thank you. So in essence there, you're again saying that as the event progressed through the summer, you made improvements to the system to improve the queuing system.
That's correct.
And you've got further plans in place. Can you detail what plans in place, just to cover it again? Just put what plans you have to put to ensure that the queues are socially distanced in future.
Of course. So the queues will be staggered. So inside the site, sometimes this is called a Disney queue, but a Disney queue would mean that customers could potentially, even though if they're in different parts of the queue, they could be very close to each other, which would not be socially distanced. So we are making adaptations to that to allow to make sure everyone's socially distanced, but they won't be going curved around the site, which is how they were over the summer. They'll actually be staggered, which will allow for more people to be inside the site, and an ample amount to make sure that they do not spill out onto the street. And Harrier are going to come down and have already done a site visit to the site after the event to see how that would work and make markers on the floor. And this will be something that will obviously the COVID social distance stewards and marshals will also be able to enforce, but it will allow for more people to queue within the site to make sure that we have ample queuing in place so that we do not have any sort of disturbance or nuisance within the local community, and also that customers are staying safe, because that is our most important thing, that customers are staying safe, they're social distancing, and they are adhering to the government guidelines and also the guidelines that are put in place by us, the event organisers.
Okay, thank you. And so how many people will be able to queue on site?
So this number is not determined yet. So Harrier will come down and do the queuing system, but we will have enough people to make sure that we can fit the people that come into our to that sitting. And in addition to that, we're also working with our ticketing platform company to so depending on the number that Harrier will give us, we're working with our ticketing platform to work out and to implement, if needed, some staggered times tickets, so that people will have a time of arrival. Therefore, we'll be able to work out how many people we can get through per minute, and therefore work out how many tickets we can allocate for a set time. So, for example, if it was 12 till 3 slot, customers, perhaps we would have X number of customers turn up at 4:12. And then we'd have the next set turn up, just as an example, at 12:15 and then 12:30, and that would be based on working out how many customers we can get through the site entrance, safe, socially distanced at any one time. So we've got several measures in place to make sure that we don't spill out onto the road and cause any traffic management problems or problems for people walking past. As mentioned, I live on Muswell Street, so I know the area well, and I really want to work with the local community there as a member of the local community myself. So it's definitely something that we want to do to make sure that we don't have customers or attendees spill out onto the street, and it's definitely something that we want to do and we will do to make sure that everyone's social distance within the site, but yeah, don't spill out onto the street. So we've got a number of combination of things that we can do.
Thank you. So you envisage therefore that there won't be any queuing on the street going forward, or at least that is your aim.
That's correct. Yeah, that's our aim, and we'll do everything and work with every contractor to make sure that happens.
Okay. And
Chair,
thank you, David.
When you've a moment, be grateful for legal comment. Gavin Tempest will know this. I'm not sure his client does, but just to flag, you need to be sure whether this is being offered as an optimistic hope or whether this is being offered as an amendment to the operating schedule at this time. So you've heard an awful lot of words there, but basically it boiled down to any queuing within our site. And I think you do need to know whether that is a change to the operating schedule or just something that's going to be looked at in optimistic hope.
Mr. Tempest, can you respond to that, please?
Sorry for the delay. Yeah, so the aim is, David, that queuing will be staggered as far as possible inside the site. The aim is that there'll be a taxi collection service which will be entirely inside the site. So to say 100% guaranteed, we could say there's a condition that there will be no queuing outside the site is probably ambitious, but we can say that there will be a staggered queuing facility entirely inside the site, and there will be taxi collection, drop-off and collection service inside the site, with the aim that to minimise the amount of queuing outside. That makes sense.
Okay, David, have you got that? Is that satisfactory?
Chair, we've got two, I think, proposed conditions from the applicant that queuing will be staggered and so far as possible to happen within the site. There will be taxi collection drop-off within the site. So number two, I think, is a bit firmer than number one. Number one is limited to so far as possible. Mr. Gavin Tempest has been clear on that, and you know how far he can go.
Okay, thank you. Right, so Mr. Russell Davis and Ms. Olive, could you respond to the claims that there is no longer an issue with food and alcohol coming off site, and also your experience with the queues later on in the summer as the events drew to a close? Mr. Russell Davis first.
Yes, so to the issue that, to the point raised, rather, that there was improvements made to the queues as the event went on. I do have photographic evidence that that's not the case, as in the last event that occurred, the final weekend in September. I can supply photographic evidence that those queues were still snaking out onto the public highway and all the way around to St Mary's Works, so I would contest that claim. I haven't witnessed any alcohol or food taken off site in September, in the late September weeks, but would obviously very much welcome that being enforced going forward more strongly, as I have again have photographic evidence that there have been incidents where litter has been left outside my home, including food containers and the plastic cups that Mr. Femiola referenced.
Okay, thank you. Sandra Olive, please.
Yeah, I mean, I can only comment on my observations, and my observations over the weeks that the market was in place was that every weekend was the same, and that every weekend there was a considerable amount of disturbance. Now, whether you are selling beer cans on site or not, I accept that that's not the case. That has never been an issue in the 7 years I've lived there before. So something has changed. Now, whether it's the ethos that people think this is a neck of the woods in the city that they can now come and drink in, and are taking drink to your venue and then bringing it back out again to continue their drinking afterwards, I don't know. I haven't been monitoring it because I thought it was a temporary process. So I was aware of it and counting the weeks down until it was finished. But that was as far as it went. I don't know if I feel reassured particularly. I think unless you're going to be a bit more proactive about monitoring people and drink are not a good combination, are they, if you're in terms of responsible behaviour? And I don't have anything to make me think that that's not going to be a problem going forward. And the thought of it being 7 days a week is, difficult. I don't look forward to coming home. I get home from the hospital quite late, generally speaking, and it was difficult to park. I can only assume that people are using the permit holders car park. Again, hasn't been a problem since the market finished. So, there was an impact, a measurable impact, which didn't abate over the course of the 7 weeks, didn't change over the course of the 7 weeks, and I don't anticipate it changing if this goes ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think we better hear from others who've been waiting patiently. So, Councillor Schmira, I'll come to you in a moment. And we have Mr. Westgarth from the Market Traders Association. Can you introduce your thoughts, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to say that I am representing the Norwich Market Traders Association. And myself as a licence holder in the city. So any scrutiny on the specifics of the licence is generally sort of my own views. However, there is a very important point I'd like to flag up on page 4 of the agenda in regards to what's relevant to the Norwich Market Traders Association. It's relevant to the point on there being no representations from planning. However, I've been listening to what was just discussed in regards to the queuing, and I'd like to react to that straight away, actually, even though it's not one of my many points that I'd like to raise. So if you look at the plan on page 22, the area that is going to be licensable is the sort of structural drinking area. And I cannot see how any kind of queuing could take place within that proposed area. The queuing would be snaking in the adjacent car park, which may or may not be owned by the same people, I don't know. However, I cannot see how you could have a snaking queue within that area and also allow the cars to park there as usual.
We'll talk to the applicant about that in due course. If you wouldn't mind just sticking to the points that you made in your representation, please.
Certainly. So the points I made in my representation was on the capacity for the event, or more the sort of lack of capacity stated in the application. I read the supporting statement or supporting documents in which Michael mentioned the figures of 600 and 5,000 people for people attending the event. Very clearly, that was not my intention to say that 5,000 people were attending the event at any one time. I wanted to point out the fact that there is no mention of a capacity in the application. And as we know, these premises licenses are very black and white. So I wanted to ask whether any capacity was going to be put in writing in the application. As far as I can see, as the box has been left blank in terms of capacity above 5,000, I wanted to ask what that was going to be.
Chair, just to flag, that's likely to be a matter for the fire service.
Okay, thank you, David. Right, yeah, if you'd like to carry on, Mr. Westgarth, we'll come back to that point in a bit.
Okay, thank you. In relation to the capacity of the site, I wanted to see if there's going to be any plans to, say, use TENS alongside this current license in the St Mary's Works building to grow the event, and whether that is something that was being planned by the as part of the proposed sort of permanent feature, or growing the business as such. The second point that I made in regards, directly in regards to the premises application, is that technology is used for people to order their alcoholic drinks, and I wanted to comment that in this current way of doing things, drinks would be ordered before any IDing would take place, as far as I know. So I wanted to question the DPS on that. So as far as I can see, you would order an alcoholic drink. It would be before you've been ID'd, and then the drink would be served, and then perhaps the IDing would take place. And I wanted to sort of question whether that was what was taking place, and whether that was the correct order in which to do things. So those are the 2 points that I've made in direct relation to the application. I feel strongly that there's a lot of things that for an event of this size should be listed and talked about that haven't been. For example, whether CCTV is an appropriate, is an appropriate condition of the license, whether or not the wardens that are doing the job of not letting alcohol off the site should be SIA trained door staff, for example, whether there should be a search policy in place, and numerous other things that I think would be appropriate of a proposition of this size. I feel that there's other contradictions within the application itself, and they include the fact that without the capacity listed, that the box ticked for presenting, or having no live music during the event, would allow, if there's less than 500 people there, allow live music to be played.
We may have questions on this. You're slightly going off track from the representation that you put in place, which in order for us to save time, I think we'll cover everything that you've mentioned, but in order for us to save time, we need to stick to those objections that you put in writing in the first place. So thank you for the moment. You'll get another chance to come in later, I'm sure. Okay, so actually, first of all, I'd like Mr. McCallum perhaps to respond to the issue of the ID, the Challenge 25.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We operate a Challenge 25 policy. We're very rigorous on it. We're strict. When people come into the site, if we suspect that they are under 25, they're challenged. We check their ID and they're given a wristband. That's step one. Step two, you rightly point out, it is a digital ordering system due to COVID. So it's contact free between staff. Staff don't have to go to the tables to actually take orders. It's all done just within a smartphone web page. You have to verify your age. There's a pop-up that comes up that says, if you want to buy alcohol, you need to be over 18, obviously. So that's the second line of defense. And the third line of defense is if a server takes a tray of drinks to the table and they are unsure, then again, they're challenged to make sure that they are over 18.
Okay, thank you for that. So with the the checks being made. I suspect that the just a declaration within a web app probably isn't satisfactory challenge 25 because you need ID. So only the first and second of those would be relevant.
It's just a further step that we take, Chair. So that we challenge them initially, yeah, and they're given a wristband just to confirm that they are over 18. And then subsequent to that, once they then get onto the app, well, it's not an app, it's a web page. When they get onto that to place the order, they then confirm again. And then, like I say, once again, once a server comes to the table, if they haven't got a wristband or they're not sure, they'll be challenged at that point as well.
Okay, so this is a family site. There are children that attend. How do you prevent people under the age of 18 from being purchased drinks by those that are over 18?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Chair. And it's the first thing that I actually spoke to Michelle at Police Licensing in regard to that fact when the project was first put into place. And I wanted to find out exactly what her stance was on it. And she made a very good point. I mean, it's to be sort of treated in very much a similar way to a beer garden at a pub, where you do get families, and people of age that can drink and can't. And so the advice that she gave is just to be very proactive. We have loads of staff on the site. I mean, we have approximately 40 staff who are all briefed and are told exactly how to monitor for this exact thing. So it's a case of if anyone's suspicious, if there is a family at the table, say for example, and there is a younger son, then it's a question of being proactive, keeping an eye on things. If there is alcohol on the table, if anyone suspects anything, there's a report mechanism in place between the supervisors and the management. So yeah, it's something that we keep obviously a very close eye on. But Chair, it's as Gavin pointed out, it's not this whole project. It's not a drinking. It's more of it's more food based, and the alcohol is supplemental to that. And it's not a place for underage people to really frequent. The majority of our clientele are in their 30s. Professional business people, and there are families as well, of course, but predominantly it's not a young person kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. So you keep records of challenges?
Yeah, we have an incident book. Yeah, of course. And if a customer is challenged, we make a note of that, and we have those books on record.
Okay, and at tables where people are suspecting of providing drink to underage people, are those recorded as well? And how many of those challenges have your staff had to make?
We challenged approximately 250 members of the public. Bearing in mind it's a challenge 25 policy. So that's obviously more than we're not looking for people that just look under 18. We're looking for people that are under 25. So yeah, we challenged about 250 people, and we have records of that. What happens to the staff when they go to the table and they ask us to keep an eye on it, or they tell other members of staff looking after that area to keep an eye on it. Admittedly, we don't actually write that down, but all the staff are aware just to keep an eye on table 28, for example. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And now, Councillor Schmierer, thank you for waiting.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And obviously, my comments largely come out of what local residents have been in touch with me about. I wrote to several hundred local residents in the sort of wider area to get an idea of what the general mood was, and then obviously got feedback. And as you can see in my representation, the concerns generally cover some of the major or the 4 licensing objections, namely antisocial behaviour and trying to prevent crime, as well as prevent public nuisance. And I'll start by obviously saying that I understand how difficult a situation the hospitality sector finds itself in at the moment, but it is still absolutely essential that we don't lose focus on those 4 licensing objectives. So obviously we've already heard from local residents on this platform here, as well as in the documents, about the concerns that they have about antisocial behaviour, whether that be about things like public urination, or whether that be about sort of street drinking and the such like. And I think it's very important to remember that obviously, as I say, these licensing objectives, in particular, when it comes to public nuisance. And if you look at page 98, of course, on your document, it does go through what the ideas of public nuisance are. And I'll just read a little section of it, if I may, Chair. It is important to remember, and this is what it says here, it is important to remember that the prevention of public nuisance could therefore include low-level nuisance, perhaps affecting few people living locally, as well as major disturbance affecting the whole community. It may also include, in appropriate circumstances, the reduction of the living and working amenity and environment of other persons living and working in the area of the licensed premise. And I think from the reaction that I got from local residents, it certainly, this premise did impact on them, and impact on them detrimentally. So I would certainly, I'm in favour of those police conditions, of course, but I think that more can be done. And I think we've already heard about questions about, for example, the capacity of the venue, about CCTV, and about other mitigations there. For me, I know one of the residents has talked about the issue of queuing there. For me, it also seems that the bigger issue from what local residents were telling me is actually at the end of the event at 10 o'clock, and some of the sort of fallout from it did, as I put in my comments, did seem to go on for a considerable amount of time, up to 11 o'clock. Now, I understand, as someone who lives in the city centre myself, that obviously you do get affected by noise and some kind of antisocial behaviour, but that doesn't have to be the norm and de rigueur. And certainly, we did hear from the applicant talking about actually that crime seem to remain roughly stable, but actually, if you have a look at the crime levels in Mancroft ward, so the ward in which it is, these are some of the highest, certainly in Norfolk, if not in the UK. And for example, public order offences in the ward are about 7 times as high as the national average. So actually, we should be looking at ways to mitigate rather than keep it level at the moment. And so I think that this application, they could do more to deal with this. In terms of also when it comes to the sort of approach that has been taken, we've already heard that there are concerns about how the consultation and how the premise sort of has worked and going forward will work with local neighbours. And I just want to remind the committee members, of course, that in 2015 the Norwich City Council licensing policy was agreed upon, and in it, on page 10 of this policy, under 3.2, I don't know if you've got access to it, Chair, but I'll just read it for the benefit of committee members and also people on this on the Zoom call. Applicants, and this is what it says here, applicants must
We appear to have lost
the type of premises.
Martin, we lost you right at the beginning of just as you started reading that. Could you just start again?
Sorry,
please?
apologies. Yes, my Wi-Fi seems to be a bit recalcitrant at the moment. Anyway, so I'll just quote it. Applicants must address the 4 licensing objectives, in their operational plan. The operating plan must have regard to the nature of the area where the premises are situated, the type of premises, the licensable activities to be provided, operational procedures, and the needs of the local community. The operating schedule must demonstrate how the premises will be good neighbours, both to residents and to other venues and businesses. So that is a very obviously noble aim, and I have got questions about how a venue that has got a capacity, I assume, of up to 500 people, that goes 7 days a week, that goes till 10 p.m. in an already area that is blighted by high levels of public order offences, is going to improve and ameliorate the community and has been that good neighbour. So I'd like the applicant to sort of respond to that. In terms of some of the specific concerns, in terms of that being that good neighbour and preventing public nuisance, residents have commented that the smells coming from the food outlets obviously go on for a considerable period of time, from 12 till 10, and the smell lingers there. We've already heard about the noise, in particular people loitering after the event, and other sort of public nuisances. So I would question whether the application is appropriate, certainly for 7 days a week, and certainly weekdays to go to 10 o'clock. I would question whether there is enough being done to deal with the noise at departure, and also with regards to potential antisocial behaviour as a result of it, whether enough is being done to deal with those, what it says in the councils and the national licensing policies about sort of minor nuisances such as odours. And so I'd be very interested to hear what the applicant has to say about that, in particular to mitigate that and ensure that they are indeed good neighbours, as this council's own licensing policy does state.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, so there's a few things there that the applicant will wish to respond to. It seems that a lot of the objectors, those that are present on this meeting, and also those that Martin has referred to, are saying that there's a noise issue when people are leaving the event, and especially late at night. Have there been any issues about noise within the site or emanating from within the site? Martin, I'll just ask you directly, have you heard from residents about issues with noise from the site while in operation?
Yes.
Either music or voices.
Not so much in terms of music. In fact, actually, there was another temporary event notice, which was the big issue there was the actual live music. So that seems to be the case. And as I understand it, and maybe David and the solicitor who could provide legal support on this can clarify this. But as I understand it, by virtue of the fact that this is applying not to have live music, or indeed not to have public music broadcast, it means that the capacity will be limited to under 500 people. So it's more
Happy to do that now, if that will help, Chair.
Yes, please.
No, they're completely irrelevant. Not asking for a licensable activity does not limit your numbers. I'd also be careful, because of course a relevant representation has been made by the councillor, and it's very important the applicant isn't ambushed by the councillor going off and considering some matter that isn't on his representation. And I'm trying to find the relevant page. Page 70, I think it is.
Yeah, page 70. There is a question within Councillor Schmira's response here about the live music.
Yeah. As you know, the government's done the Live Music Act, for example, and some matters do not need a license. But that is the general law, not something you need to worry about today.
Okay, thank you. So just to confirm, there is no application for live music at this venue.
No, it is simply on sales only of alcohol.
Yes, okay. And by definition, that allows music to be played at background levels. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it shouldn't be the primary reason people are there. And the rule of thumb is that you can have a conversation without shouting while it's on. It is background music. Doesn't need licensing.
Okay, thank you. While I think we'll hear again from Mr. Tempest, who can respond to the questions and issues that Councillor Schmira raised, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got quite a lot of questions in respect of the last two interested parties, actually. As David says, some of these things weren't raised in the representations, although quite frankly, we would like the opportunity to answer them. So if you bear with me, I'll probably start with Toby, some of the things that Toby raised, and very quickly go through those, if that's all right, Chair.
Please do.
So there seemed to be a concern about capacity. The fact of the matter is that the site is limited for capacity currently, and is likely to, as long as this operation will be in business, by virtue of the fact that there only has to be available seating for 2, 4 or 6 people. It's limited occupancy on table service. So people aren't wandering around. They're fixed at tables where they book in and they get their service. And if you measure the distance between those 2, 4 or 6 person tables, there's only a fixed amount of space left so that people can safely walk, and waiting staff and other operatives at the site can move about. So the maximum current capacity or even expected capacity will be 450. But as David Lowen says, in any event, there's a fire safety risk assessment in place that is site specific to what goes on at any particular time. So at the moment, it's limited by social distancing, but even without that, it's not going to be a much larger capacity because of by virtue of the fact that they want to keep comply with those that safe capacity for evacuation. So we can reassure people that, you know, what's been stated is what's intended, and that's probably all that could ever happen at this site for the life of the project. And also there was some sort of last minute mention of whether CCTV would be appropriate here. And if I could just refer the subcommittee back to the conversation that we've had over police representations, we did discuss this in some detail. So for it to be a proportionate measure, there'd have to be something that we thought was going to happen or could reasonably expect that was going to happen that would make CCTV a legitimate preventive or do something towards the crime disorder or public safety objective. And having discussed that in detail with the police, it's not felt that it's a family event with a limited number of people having table service. Then there was some mention about what the wardens were doing and whether wardens should be SIA accredited. And of course, the Security Industry Act does make it clear the role for accredited SIA operatives. And what we're talking about here is basically a customer service that is enhanced to allow people to safely enjoy this experience. And that's why there are people who are there to monitor queues and to give advice about when there are queues, about keeping distance from each other and wearing masks, etc. But I would argue, well, it's a fact that there are over 40 members of staff there, and there are always sufficient staff amongst that number to be able to do those services as customer services without straying into areas where they're dealing with conflict resolution or other things. But it is now a condition offered with the licence that a written risk assessment will be in place to assess the requirements for SIA security staff, and that will be reviewed and kept at the premises, made available to the police and licensing authority. So if things ramp up because of COVID security, or there's a need to be a bit more robust around customers who might be queuing outside of the site or being noisy or whatever, then it will become a condition of the license that the applicant will review that and have a written risk assessment about whether that's a proportionate thing to do. And the police, I'm sure you'd agree, will want to make sure that happens. And then the councillor just sort of mentioned about 10 p.m. closure. The first thing I'd say that obviously the residents, he's very adeptly representing residents, but they aren't here speaking for themselves. And certainly on the last 4 of the temporary event notices, there was a mandatory 10 p.m. closure here. So everything closes, food, drink, any lighting, everything closes at 10 p.m. and everybody leaves the site. And without being able to ask questions of individuals who are saying that things are still happening after 11 o'clock. That just can't happen as a result of what has been happening and what can happen with the new license. It's just not plausible, I'm afraid. And lastly, no, not lastly, sorry, I'll have to go on. Councillor Schmierer mentioned the crime and disorder levels, and I think was implying that this operation should not be allowed to have a premises license unless they actually reduced crime and disorder. Well, I'm sorry, but they're not contributing towards it. And our case is it hasn't, and the crime figures clearly show that. And we'll do everything we can to mitigate against the nuisance that people perceive they are having locally. But we can't be expected to reduce what is a crime hotspot in the Mancroft ward. That's not something that this premises application should be held accountable to do. And as regards smells, I mean, that is, I suppose, a relevant representation because of public nuisance, but I just want to ask Michael about that, really, because again, that doesn't seem plausible, bearing in mind the operation there is. Would you like to just talk about that, Mike, please?
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. So a lot of our traders' food is made, prepared elsewhere, and therefore there's minimal cooking on site, and therefore minimal cooking odors. In addition to that, a lot of our vendors are in self-contained units or in tent structures. And therefore, the smells or the smoke or anything like that would rise up into the tent and not outside of that, or minimal amounts outside of that. And in addition, there's very high buildings around the site, and therefore, I am struggling to see how the odours would go on to Oak Street, for example, and then if anyone on Duke Street, the way that the food vendors are positioned is very far away from sort of the entrance of the site in Duke Street, and there's minimal housing around it. So we've not had any complaints about odours, and when we've walked onto the site ourselves, it's not something that I have spotted as an issue, and I've been on site, every weekend whilst we've been operating. And again, the vendors are positioned very far away from sort of the main street there. So I do struggle to see how the odours are there. And as Gavin mentions, obviously the residents of his constituency aren't here to sort of give further details on the apparent smell or odours coming from the site.
Okay, thank you for that. I believe Councillor Schmierer might want to come back on that, specifically about those odours, because if people are coming to you and saying that there's odours, we currently have the applicant suggesting that that isn't the case. Therefore, how many people did talk about odours with you, Martin?
2 people, and it is largely, as the applicant has said, a bit further down Oak Street towards the Ring Road, and the little street just behind there. I'll see if I can bring it up the map and tell you exactly where. So just if you just bear with me for 30 seconds while I just bring up if it's even on the map of the area. I don't think it's even on there. Yeah, so it's just a bit further down Oak Street, so just north of the site, just the road just off Oak Street there, and as I said, one on Oak Street. So that's the issue there, and I don't know what, if anything, you can do as an operation to mitigate that further. This is obviously outside of my expertise, but maybe the applicant can come in and explain what they could potentially look at, and potentially look at that as a condition of the granting a license.
Okay, thank you. Just briefly, if you can respond to that, please. Mr. Tempest or Michael?
Mike, if you've looked at it.
Great. Just I'm a bit unsure if I'm guessing it's the other end of Duke Street, away from the site near the Ring Road. Predominantly student housing is behind the site, and obviously student housing, they wouldn't have been here during the period that we were operating. With regards to mitigating any odours leaving the site, this is something I can work with our specialist contractors, Harrier, but also we can look at it again. It's not my expertise in terms of coming up with solutions sort of on the spot for something that is not been sort of mentioned during the time that we were operating. And so, therefore, I'm not going to come up with suggestions here and now of ways in which we can eliminate the apparent smell of odours. But for sure, going back to my points raised, a lot of the food is prepared off-site and obviously cooked, sort of not warmed up, but is prepared and cooked off-site. So, I am struggling to see how this issue with regards to the odours is apparent or is a strong issue, because it's not something that the smell of food isn't even within the site isn't massively strong. With the high walls behind where the Phoenix gym is, I really struggle to see how those odours would go over such high walls and onto Oak Street. We are talking very, very high walls here, and it's enclosed. The site is completely enclosed, so the smell of odours, especially to the other end of Oak Street, nearing the junction there, that's a sizable distance for the odours to go.
Okay, thank you. Right, so just for clarification then, regarding capacity, the site plan that we've got here, does the site plan that we've got presented on page 22, is that reflected in the photos that we saw earlier? Is the site plan that we've got here the same site plan that you've used throughout, and reflected in those photographs that we saw earlier?
Yes, it is. We try to present the subcommittee with a video showing the before and after of the site, which would have perhaps elaborated on that. And I think just on that subject, the whole of the site, including the area of car park not licensed, is owned by this our place, is it not, Mike? So there are opportunities to do queuing inside that space to reassure people that is part of the car park, because the car park is owned by the business who are providing the operation. Is that not right, Mike?
That's correct. And in addition to that, we did have we have been in constant communication with the Norfolk Fire Department to work with them on both our fire risk assessments. We've had a fire risk assessment done after the event was operated, in the hope of getting a premises license, and we've got an action plan there that has been approved by Norfolk Fire, and then in addition to that, we'll have another assessment done to confirm maximum capacities. But as Gavin mentioned, obviously there is only a limit based on the fact that this is table service. We are currently forced to socially distance, so there isn't an ability, for example, to go up to the 5,000 mentioned, because there just simply isn't space. And then, in addition to the capacity, we work with Norfolk Fire Service to make sure that everyone's agreed on the capacity. So that includes like how many fire exits we have on site. In addition, the exit time can completely vary from council, from different areas of the country. The fire department will want different exit times, so there's quite a few. It's quite a complex process that will be done to determine the maximum optimum capacity. It's not simply we want to have a capacity of 1,000 people, and therefore we can have a capacity of 1,000 people. It's a complete almost consultation between our risk assessor, our health and safety team, and then also Norfolk Fire Service, to make sure that everyone is happy with the assessment that's been done, to make sure that we know our safe capacity, maximum capacity. Okay. And again, just
Thank you. The question really is, at the moment, we're talking about 450. What would be the maximum capacity that you would envisage based on the criteria that you've outlined?
Yeah, so based on the criteria outlined, we don't have much more space on site to go above that. So I would not see the maximum capacity going up above 500, 550 perhaps. But again, this is not something that I can say, but because the maximum capacity will need to be determined by a multitude of different people. But it's certainly not in our interest or in our plans to dramatically increase the capacity of the event.
Okay, thank you. And you also referred there to the space you have for queuing on site. Mr. Westgarth, I think that was your question. Does that satisfactorily answer that question?
I cannot say that I'm reassured in regards to either, in particular the capacity. You know, I wonder why a figure isn't being put on the license. To me, I feel it's just room to grow, to build the business, to build the event. You know, I feel that it's what isn't being said than what is being said. If the structure was going to remain how it's been operated on the Thames, then it would take no time at all to put in the to name a capacity. However, so I do not feel reassured on this. And in learning that the additional car park, the adjacent car park, is also owned under the same, by the same person. Again, I can see just scope for the for the business to grow into that space, including the queuing. That is where you do have other businesses at the moment, around it. You've got an office block, you've got a working mechanics there, and I can see sort of variations down the line to grow the to grow the proposition. So I don't particularly feel reassured in either. I feel that a capacity would need to be said now for this particular license to be granted for me to be happy.
Okay, right. Just before we go back to you, Gavin Tempest, we've had other members of the committee that haven't had an opportunity to ask questions yet. So Mr. Tempest, you can come back on that point shortly, but I'll ask members if they'd like to contribute at that point.
If I could, Chair, thank you very much. We've heard quite a lot about the potential provisions for queuing at this site. It was also mentioned that everything will have to stop abruptly at 10 o'clock. I suppose my question then is, how safely are numbers of people moved out of the site, maintaining social distancing? I have a couple of other questions, but perhaps if I could just have a response to that one first, please.
Yeah, can you respond to that first, and also you indicated you wanted to respond to Toby Westgarth, so please do that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just I mean, Toby isn't reassured, and we'd like to reassure him. There are two issues that I've been trying to describe, and I think Mike's described it. If we look at the plan shows the area for licensable activity. So there is no option, if the premises license is granted with that plan, to do anything else other than have a queue in the other car park area. So the other car park area is where the applicant, Mike, was talking about the staggered queuing. So that is space that's owned by our place. That space is available off Duke Street, where people have had issues with the queue extending onto Duke Street. So that we mentioned that specifically as a mitigation against the people's concerns about the length of the queue. So there's two different things at place, but there can be no growth in the operation without further applications. It's as simple as that. So we'd ask that we've made the application with that plan, with this license application, and that's hopefully where we'll go with that. As social distancing on departure to this dispersal, So, I mean, I'll do, if you don't mind, Chair, I'll just ask a question to unpack that. So what is the most number of people over the 7 weekends, including the bank holiday, that were leaving at 10 o'clock? Mike, please.
At 10 o'clock, basically there's natural dispersion of the event throughout the course of each sitting. This is sort of because there's such a mixed demographic that families perhaps won't stay right until the end. Other people may have come just for a quick something to eat after shopping in the city. So there's a natural dispersion, and in answer to Gavin's question, there was no more than 75 to 100 people at any one time, right up to the close. And if anything, we saw quite a drop off, even more so to sort of on Sundays, for example, we were left sometimes with 1/10 full of sort of 12, which is 12 tables, and that was at 9 o'clock. So on average, I'd say it was around about 50 to 75 people leaving, but a maximum was 100.
Thank you for that. So if we had, let's say, 50 to 75 people leaving all at the same time, and the site is having to be cleared sharply at 10 o'clock, what measures were being put in place to ensure that social distancing was taking place? Was that where the marshals, who were described as enhanced customer service, were coming in?
So when in terms of people, that's when Gavin sort of mentions about the end of the session, that's kind of when we make the announcement that there's 15 minutes left, and at that point, you can start to see people leaving immediately, and then there's some people that will leave within the next 15 minutes. So I wouldn't say at any one time there was 100 people actually leaving the site, but up until that sort of last part of each sitting, so the last 15 minutes, you would see a natural dispersion of the said 100 people, again, the COVID marshals will make sure that people leave socially distanced, and again further up at the site, where the main entrance to the site is, again making sure that people aren't lingering around in that area as well.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear,
more questions?
Yes, I've got a couple of other questions, Chair, please. So just to be clear, I mean, presumably it's not natural dispersal, because that would be people sort of mingling out, potentially not social distancing. There were strict measures in place to ensure that as people were leaving, social distancing was being maintained.
Sorry, sorry, perhaps my choice of words there wasn't. But there were strict measures in place to make sure.
Okay.
Social distance. So apologies for that.
Okay, thank you for your clarification on that. We've heard quite a lot about concerns around public urination, littering, noise, and other issues. In terms of promoting the licensing objectives, what measures would be put in place to see that those kinds of issues would be prevented?
So here we do a lot of different. We have a lot of different things in place to sort of the prevention of crime and disorder. So and protection of the sort of children from harm, public nuisance, and public safety. So start off with because this is kind of my field. So public safety. We've got strict risk assessments in place, both COVID risk assessments. And general risk assessments and general fire risk assessments as well, so we follow them. We update them as and when needed, and we work with Harry on our 2 weekly briefings to make sure that is in place. And then in terms of public nuisance, so we have our different steps in place in terms of the signage around the site to respect our neighbours. Again, we leaving the site and making sure that people aren't congregating at the entrance. And I'd like to sort of go to Rob from an operational point of view. I think you'd have some additional comments to make there.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, absolutely. So what I think we would look to do is just, although we have some great signage on the exits to the site, I don't know if that was shown in any of the photographs, but just to increase signage really, and to reiterate, we have a PA system for the background music, just to reiterate to customers, perhaps, if you do need the toilet, before you leave, it'd be a good idea to do that. Again, to please, respect our neighbours as you leave the site. I think that's all we really can do.
If just would offer, just by way of clarification, in terms of prevention of public nuisance, it is offered as a condition of the application for the premises licence that a noise assessment will be conducted prior to it being open with the premises licence, and that the recommendations will be acted on prior to opening. And there has actually been a proper noise acoustic assessment, which was reassuring because it monitored the use of any amplified music and voice provision that was made, and it's reassuring, I suppose, that no local people have experienced any nuisance as a result of noise emanating from the site, either vocal or through any other sort of sound. But it's a condition of the license to do this once more prior to this being owned as a premises license, and that will include noise escape because of the aggregate volume of people's voices, either on the site or as they leave at the point of dispersal. That is hoped to be a proactive condition, because it becomes part of the premises license that has to be done prior to this business going live again.
Sorry, Gavin, can I just interject 1 second just to say that there was one other point of what we would look to do, and that would be the, as Gavin mentioned earlier, the inclusion of a taxi rank within the site. So obviously that would mean less people actually leaving the site, straight into taxis and away.
Okay.
What provision, how many taxis would be able to be on site at any one time?
Michael?
Yeah, so again, that will be able to sort of give further clarification on that once we have worked out where our queuing system will be placed and how that is done with Harriet. But one thing I can say is that we've got a very good relationship with taxi firms in Norwich through our previous experience organising events, and we have direct line of communication with ABC taxis, Courtesy taxis, B-line taxis, and Loyal taxis as well. And so we have spoken to them and mentioned about our plans of doing a taxi rank, and they've welcomed those, and we'll communicate to the drivers about where to pick up, and we'll have direct line of communication and feedback. Get feedback from the taxi companies directly from the drivers if there's any issues with the taxi ranks, or if there's any ways that we can improve that, and we'll then implement that as long as obviously that fits in with our social distancing. So I'm very confident that we will be able to do a taxi rank. But in terms of an actual number, that's not something I can give now, but I would suggest that the space is large, and is owned by our place, the site developers who we work in have a working relationship with to have the land. We do have a lot at our disposal to be able to fit a good queuing system in there, and also a good taxi rank.
Okay, thank you. Can you point out in the application where this is referenced, the new taxi rank? I'm just looking through the papers.
I'm not sure it is, Chair. I think it was a late presented condition whilst Mr. Tempest was presenting his application this morning.
Yes, okay, because there is a potential highways issue with queuing taxis through a site, because you have the potential for taxis to be queuing on the highway to access the site, and also potential for them to be crossing the public footpath. I don't know, David, whether this is something that Highways would want to look at.
Impossible to say, Chair, and they certainly will be out of time for today's hearing anyway. I should set it aside so far as you can.
Okay, thank you. Apologies to Councillor Huntley. Would you like to pick up any more questions, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, another question I had was regarding the relationship with Harrier, who are the security contractors. We were advised that there's been constant communication on the briefings on, was it Mondays and Fridays? I'd be interested to hear of things that had come up over the course of those briefings where adjustments or changes had been enacted.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of different changes and things and how we acted, the first weekend, I can give you an example, customers were coming onto site, they were handed a piece of Jenga which had a table number on, and then were allowed to go to their tables. That was something that we did to get people onto the site, but when in practice, it didn't work as well, because what happened was all the orders came in very quickly. So we contacted Harrier the very next morning, had a discussion with them, and what we ended up changing is we had our serving staff would walk attendees to a designated table. And whilst they were walking them to the table, they would make sure that they were walking in opposite directions to other serving staff that will be taking another group to a table, so further making sure that inside the site there was socially distancing. And then once the serving staff took them to the table, they placed them down and explained the different measures in which we had in place to make sure that attendees were safe and adhering to our guidelines. And that was advice that was given to us by Harrier. And so yes, we had the 2 weekly daily briefings, but when needed, we also worked with them throughout the weekend to make sure that we were best placed and had some good sort of procedures in place. Another one would be the inclusion of the designated COVID marshals. So after our first weekend, we spoke to Harrier, explained about what happened and different things that were in place, and they mentioned about the COVID security marshals, and also the addition of jackets with branding on the back, so it was clear of their role, and people could ask questions or if needed. Another one would be the constant advice they give us with regards to changes in government guidance. Obviously, government guidance is changing regularly, so we were in constant communication with them. In the inclusion of temperature checking for staff as measures as the cases were rising across the UK. We had actually implemented a check sheet for traders to make sure that the traders were adhering to our trader risk assessment, to make sure that they had things in place such as hand washing facilities, such as fire extinguisher, and the different measures in which the traders would give us their risk assessments, and basically we Harrier worked to create a checklist for us. So the traders would tick off our checklist, and then Rob in operations would then check himself, so it'd be double checked to make sure that traders were adhering to their own risk assessments and also the guidance and the law. So there was Harrier. We worked extensively with Harrier throughout the project, and it was their advice about the queues. To work on a queuing system within the site, and again the taxi rank. So they've given advice during the event, but also they've given advice on how we can move forward if we were given a premises license, and the different best practices that we could do to adhere to all the licensing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Huntley, have you finished for now?
Yes, that's
okay,
my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so finally, Councillor Youssef, apologies for leaving you till last. It's just because you were last on my screen. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just got one very brief question, which again refers back to the queuing system. I visited the site in its last week of operation in late September, so this was long after the COVID marshals were introduced. And I did see the COVID marshals in the queue, but unfortunately they didn't patrol the queue at all, and this resulted in no social distancing being adhered to at the end of the queue. And unfortunately, when we reached the part of the queue where the marshals were, namely the start of the queue, they weren't maintaining social distancing practices there either. People were blatantly breaking social distancing, and unfortunately they weren't being reprimanded or anything by the marshals. I just wondered if you cared to respond to that, and maybe, as I see it, further training is needed in some form or other to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you. Yeah, so basically that was a point that we were working with Harry and was actually part of our event debrief. So we have highlighted that they need clear roles, they need clear roles and guidance, and you're right, further training to make sure that they know of the practices in which they need to look out for and check, and that will also be helped by obviously, as if the site was given a premises license, it wouldn't be a temporary event as such. We would be able to have more procedures in place to make sure that we could adhere to social distancing, but I completely agree that that they'll be designated, they'll be trained, and they'll have a clear set of roles in which that they need to maintain and enforce throughout the event, and that includes like a timed role. So like at the start of the session, the roles that they'll need to be undertaking, when the queues get to a certain stage, the roles that they need to be undertaking, positioning within the site, and then also, like as mentioned, whilst the event is in operation, and then again as people leave the event and either more people turn up, or if it's at the end of the day, what the different things that they need to be in place at different times. So yeah, I completely agree. There needs to be clear and concise roles for them, and they need to make sure that sorry about the noise there. Yeah, so there needs to be clear roles for them, further training, and and a set role, so they make sure that they know exactly what they're doing, exactly when they're doing it, at what time, and yeah, so no, completely agreed, and that's a valid point. Thank you very much. But that was in our event debrief, and that was one of the points that was raised.
Okay, thank you for that. So would you like to come back on that, Councillor?
No, that satisfied my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've had nearly 2 hours, so I think we need to wrap up quite soon. I noticed that we lost Sandra Olive some time ago, which is a shame because I wanted to give people an opportunity to come back on everything that you've heard. So I'll start with Alex Russell Davis, please, if you'd like to make any more comments or have any further questions.
Yeah, I was basically just like to point out, I mean, in relation to the licensing legislation and the licensing policy and the local licensing policy, an area that hasn't come up so far is the hours that are permitted for this premises license. I think Michael mentioned that 75 to 100 people exiting the venue on a Sunday after 10 p.m. is certainly, I think, enough for a cause of disruption. I would like to see that some discussion about maybe reducing the hours, particularly on a Sunday or outside of the weekends, to maybe just daytime hours. Gavin mentioned there's not a venue for rowdy young people, and it is a family event. I feel that's kind of at odds with pushing for the sale of alcohol into 10 p.m. So I would like to see some discussion on that, if possible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Schmira, would you like to add anything, please?
Yes, actually, this follows on quite neatly from what has just been said. I mean, one of my major concerns is the fact that it is a 7-day-a-week license, and that there should be questions about the 10 p.m. closing time at particular weekdays to mitigate the kind of nuisance and noise that has already been mentioned, both here in this meeting, but also in the representations that members will have seen. There is also still the questions that haven't yet been answered with regards, as I mentioned, to odours and to the capacity, and in particular the noise, not just in the queuing system to get into the event, but most importantly at the end of the event. So I think without those some conditions put on there, and some amendments to the licensing, the license that's been applied for, I would still have major concerns about this premise. Thank you.
Okay, Toby Westgarth, any points that you haven't already made, please?
Yes, I'd like to react to Councillor Huntley in mentioning the risk assessment. I did notice myself that the last date on any sort of published risk assessment, both in regards to COVID-19 and to the original site, was dated the 27th of July. So, you know, I find it difficult to obviously make any judgments as to what was being done whilst the event was running. You know, I've had a lot of talk and a lot of ideas and what's going to be implemented, and lots about these consultations. However, there's nothing published and in writing. In regards to other things, you know, I wanted to mention on page 4 of the document, and I won't ramble on, I promise. But on page 4 of the document, it mentions that there is no representations from the planning officer. However, you know, I have spoken to the planning officer, and there is a enforcement acknowledgement notification 20/00130 that is dated the 7th of October, which is outstanding. Norwich Market Traders Association have a plethora of things to discuss at any future planning meeting, and although it's not relevant to what's been discussed today, I felt it was important to mention that, in my opinion, you know, that's something that's being avoided. I can see Norwich Market, which has already had a direct sort of loss of trade due to this event, really struggling. And if this license is granted, I can see a real smash and grab Christmas fair.
Chair, unfortunately, there is no opportunity for you to consider these matters. They are completely outside the Licensing Act.
Well, I apologise for that.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you very much for giving me the time to speak, and that'll be me.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up from what David said there, just to remind members that we're here to consider the license as put before us, and no other matters other than those relating to the licensing objectives. Okay, right. Anybody else like to speak before I give the applicant one final opportunity to address the committee? Okay.
Chair, just from me, it's a practical point. You've got opening hours and supply of alcohol with the same closing time. You've got on sales only, no off sales. So I can see possibly a difficulty where late purchase coincides very closely with the drinking up, and that might cause some difficulties on site. So I wondered how the applicant would be dealing with that.
Yes, thank you. And that actually, there's a related question to that. I was going to ask, what time do you call last orders? And we referenced earlier the recent requirement for everything to shut down at 10 o'clock. Is this the proposed shutdown time going forward? And therefore, what time would you call last orders? And with that in mind, would there be a change to your application in terms of the times that you've put on it? Who would like to respond to that? Gavin Tempest or Rob?
I'll let Rob answer that one prior to closing, if that's all right.
Yep, please.
Yeah, last orders are 30 minutes called, 30 minutes prior to closing.
At 9:30.
Second, sorry?
At 9:30, is that correct?
At 9:30. Michael?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so does that mean we need to have a change to the application? Because I believe it says 10 o'clock at the moment. And that's
No, Chair. It's up to the applicant how they would like to run their business. If they're asking for 10 and they want to introduce a 9:30 last orders, perfectly sensible.
okay. Right. But they can sell alcohol up to 10 o'clock, but also have to close at 10 o'clock.
If that's what they're asking for, then how they, if they're granted it, how they organise that to make sure there's no 5-minute drinking up time is up to them.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Can I make a comment on that, if I may?
Yes, briefly, please.
Thank you very much. If the last orders and all the ordering is done using technology and online, how can you prohibit people ordering past 9:30 on the app?
If I may answer that, yeah, we have complete control of when customers can order. It's a flick of a switch.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I didn't see any other indications. So finally, Mr. Tempest, Gavin Tempest, if you'd like to just give us your final thoughts, and then we'll make our determination.
Thank you everybody. Hopefully people have had an opportunity to say what's on their mind, and we noted all those issues that have been raised by various different interested parties. And just to reiterate, this is a business that will only work if it continues to be good neighbours. A lot of things will have to happen, most of which are conditions of the licence prior to this this opening, if a premises licence is granted. For example, a noise assessment, for example, renewing the COVID-19 risk assessment, etc., etc. It's not just going to, be a replica of what's happened. It will be current and up to date. And referring to the licensing objectives, including the new condition that was discussed earlier regarding queuing and the provision of taxi service. This comprehensively covers the 4 licensing objectives. There have been no representations from any of the responsible authorities, but all have been involved in the drafting of this application. And we wouldn't want to marginalise people who feel that there's been an issue, but what we would want to do is to work with them so that whatever's reasonable is mitigated against. And I think you've seen from both Mike and Rob that they intend to do that. There is a market for this. It's a difficult time, but there is definitely, there are testimonials coming in from all, including people who live right next door, from all manner of people who just want this to happen over the festive period. And to be honest, that is the business model. There are no more temporary event notices available for this site until the 1st of January 2021. But there will be people, we are hopeful and optimistic, there'll be people coming in now from the beginning of December to take advantage of whatever socialising and retail activity that can happen in Norwich City Centre, and businesses will benefit from this operation, and there are people that want to do it. But in all honesty, the worries about this going on and every day of the week are unfounded, and we're being recorded saying this, that yes, there's a market for people who are going out in families to eat and drink in the run up to Christmas and over the Christmas festive period during the week. But there is the one after that, well, there isn't. And so the operation will be where people are coming into Norwich to socialise, which will be on Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And it's only a reassurance that we can give, because it has to be a business where it's popular and works with local people. And we think that the licensing objectives are met with this application quite thoroughly and have been tested and evidenced actually over 7 busy weekends. And the benefits of it, most of which we're not allowed to go into because of relevance, they are significant in this particular time. But I just ask the subcommittee just to review basically what's been said about what's actually happened in terms of crime and disorder, and the other 3 licensing objectives. There's comprehensive measures in place, and that will only get stronger if this application is granted. And that's enough from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody for sticking with it for over 2 hours now. We'll have our we'll have a break, and while we determine this. Just finally, just to sum up, we've heard really that there are a number of issues raised by members of the public about the operation, mainly outside of the venue after hours, late in the evening. I wondered, Mr. Tempest, whether you consider you've covered all of the areas, particularly about noise and antisocial behaviour. There was one final question actually about litter and what you might propose to do to mitigate litter after the event. Perhaps if you just briefly respond to those points. I think the objections are really about the antisocial behaviour and noise after the event. I just wanted to give you one last opportunity to say to tell us about what you plan to do and how you plan to work with the community to prevent it.
Okay, so the first thing is to do with litter, and I won't refer to Mike, but we've had conversations about what the role of these COVID marshals are. And they are branded people. They're not SIA door supervision, but they are people who are offering a service. It's part of customer service, but it's also to benefit the community, and they can be effective. And if there is any litter that's associated with leaving the site, which we think now that it's very unlikely unless people are sneaking that out, then the COVID marshals will be in a position to clear that up. So that's in addition to all the other measures that have been talked about. In addition, so as regards the disturbance from people leaving the site, I just refer to what Rob said about the for want of a better description, dancing people out the door. So there are people on site who are going to make sure that people leave in a safe manner, and there are big notices, or there will be even enhanced big notices saying please respect the neighbours, etc., etc. So the two things should be seen together to mitigate against the raised voices or the aggregate of voices leaving at 10 o'clock, which it will be 10 o'clock. There will be additional interventions from the many members of staff who were available at that time to make sure that people leave in a safe and quiet manner.
Okay, thank you. So are you offering as a further condition a litter pick in the immediate area at the end of the day?
I'm sure we can, can't we, Mike? Yeah.
Yeah, and then just to further sort of add to that is we do have 6 cleaners on site whose roles are to make sure that the site is clean, and therefore we could include in their roles to monitor the close vicinity of the location of the site, to make sure that there's no litter. That if someone, like Gavin has said, has snuck something out, there's no litter on the site.
Okay, thank you. David, would you like to cover the additional conditions that we've had offered during the hearing?
Yes, Chair. Putting aside the police ones that were there at the start anyway, there is the taxi collection and drop-off to be within the site, the queue to be within the site so far as possible, and that important condition has been made very clear by the applicant. Then effectively they don't sell cans, and that's important, so we don't sell cans. And lastly, there'll be a litter pick in the immediate area at the end of the day. I don't believe I've missed any, but if I have, do shout.
Okay, I'm not seeing any indications that you have, and I don't think you have. Right, thank you. Excellent. Right, so the time now is approximately 12:35. I think we'll need to have a short break, and then we'll commence our determination. So I would suggest that we return at 1 o'clock. No earlier than 1 o'clock, and we'll see you all then. And in the meantime, thank you.
Okay, so committee members, if you can all go off into your other Zoom code. Thank you.
See you in a minute.
Good afternoon. We're just coming back online. I'm just making sure that everyone's back on and the live stream's up and running before we continue, okay?
Okay, yeah, just let me know.
Oh my God. Okay, you're good to go, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody, to licensing subcommittee for the Junkyard Market, St Mary's Works. Thank you to everybody for waiting, and apologies for the extended time it took us to determine this. We had a long discussion. Taking account of all the evidence, submissions from residents and councillors, and noting the police response for recommendations rather than an objection, and that there were no other objections from responsible authorities, the subcommittee has determined to grant the licence with the conditions offered and discussed in the hearing, and 2 further conditions that you'll hear about shortly. We note controls put in place and offered to help mitigate issues raised, but accept that many issues arise off-site and are therefore not within the control of the licence holder for the purpose of this application, except for the immediate vicinity, for which we have imposed conditions for mitigation. The subcommittee is restricted in its powers by paragraph 2.24 of section 182 statutory guidance. It is important to remind members of the public that reporting of issues to the responsible authorities, including the police, is vital, and that review of any licence can be heard where sufficient evidence for problems requires it. Okay, thank you, and I'll hand over to David for to summarise the conditions and remind you of the other items.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, and just for those unfamiliar with the statutory guidance, 2.24 notes that beyond the immediate area surrounding the premises, antisocial behaviour is matters for the personal responsibility of individuals under the law. So the 2 additional conditions, firstly, that sufficient numbers of COVID marshals will be provided who will ensure that 1, social distancing of persons in the queue for the premises, both inside the site and on the public highway, is maintained, and 2, that alcohol is not taken from the site, and 3, that customers leaving the premises do not loiter in the immediate area, causing noise nuisance to residents. The second imposed condition is a variation of the police condition number 3. It was noted that there wasn't an obligation to follow the written risk assessment. So between sentences 1 and 2, the committee inserts the recommendations of this risk assessment will be followed. Thank you.
Okay, David, and the other items there were that a written determination will be presented, and also there is grounds for appeal, or an option for an appeal. David.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I'm hoping I'm coming through without any breakup, but disappointed persons, and that could be local residents or indeed the applicant, as there are imposed conditions, may appeal this decision or any part of it to the Magistrates' Court, and that right should be exercised within 21 days of receipt of the written decision that will follow.
Okay, thank you very much. So that concludes this. Does anyone have any questions about that determination before we close the meeting? I've not seen any indications. You can get in contact with Rachel and other members of the licensing team after this committee, should you wish to. Finally, I'll just say thank you to everyone again for bearing with us for a long meeting, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.